Hello here and welcome again to another edition of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. Gentlemen, we are knee deep in spring practice. It's March Madness as well. Great time of year. Lots to unpack here in the segment we like to call opening headlines. We're going to really just stick on spring practice topics here today. And, we got good access, by the way. We're going to be able to see some practice Thursday morning. We'll not be there Saturday, which is okay, by the way, because I'm coaching Carly's soccer game.
Well,
Saturday
thank God.
I got my soccer coaching debut.
Are you seriously?
Saturday morning.
Are you the head coach?
A friend, another dad named Tony. We're going to co-do it.
Two Italian guys? You're not Italian. Sean, are you serious?
Yeah.
You're the coach?
Ted
Do you know anything about
Ted
soccer?
Lasso.
No, I'm
of
Ted
Lincoln.
Lasso. That's my inspiration right now.
Yeah, I think you'll be a pretty good coach.
So we got 11 girls and
get after 'em.
Saturday
Yeah.
morning.
No
I
nonsense.
think Matt Rule kind of said no access because Sean's got to coach that soccer
Yeah.
game at Wright Park.
Right, Park? I might slip over there.
12
Live tweet it.
I think we're like 12:20 opening kick. So,
We're going to rip you, Sean.
but we'll be in practice the rest of the way. And let's get to this week's practice with Matt Rule. We got a good chance to talk to the head coach, and a lot was said. And I think we got to start with the suspensions. Anthony Grant, Tommy Hill out. We already know Alante Brown not around. There were some player departures. Chris Hickman, which has been speculated on the message board in our site and Tunnel Talk for months. That's official now. Tyreek Johnson, now official. I don't think anyone really expected him to be back for a 6 year of college. And then James Carney, somewhat of a surprise, just because that hadn't been out there. But those three players moved on. But I think the good news with Anthony Grant, we did see him present at Wednesday's Pro Day.
Yeah, so we're doing this on Wednesday. We just got into the office from Pro Day. And it was – I thought it meant something to see Anthony Grant there. If it was we'll say a bad suspension or something you were really concerned about, he might not be at the facility. Rule did not characterize it in a bad way. He said he's day-to-day, has to clean up. It sounded to me like he's got to clean up some academics, and there might be something else. So, yeah, it was good to see Anthony Grant. But that was big news. I mean, he's Nebraska's leading returning rusher, 915 yards. Tommy Hill is a guy that I would think could compete for a starting cornerback job. He got supplanted last year by Malcolm Hartzog, and I think that was the fourth game, or maybe fifth game. So, yeah, there was a lot. Rule did reveal quite a bit to us on Monday.
Yeah, and just with the Grant thing, he wasn't only there. Like, he was walking around and mingling with other players. Like, nothing was even wrong.
Had his backpack on, had his school
he
pack
just looked
on.
like a regular
Yeah.
player at that deal. So seems like that's something that doesn't appear to be a long-term concern there. Probably just has to get some stuff cleaned out. And I know that kind of one of the initial reactions to that was, this is maybe a little bit of a tone setting for Matt Rule, that, it's not just about what are we going to do this spring on the field and in the weight room and in workouts. It's you better be taking care of business.
No favorites.
Off the field. Yeah, and I don't care who you were. If you're a
Leading
starter,
rusher.
leading rusher, anything like that, if you're not doing
Yeah.
everything that we're asking you to do, there will be consequences.
And not to go back on the past, but was that always the case under the previous regime? I mean, could a guy like Maurice Washington maybe be given a little bit a lesser rope? More rope
don't
on
know.
things. I mean, was there things like that going on though? Or was every player kind of held? And I think that's the standard he's trying to set. I don't care if you were the starting running back or the lowest walk-on on the roster. You're going to be held to this standard. And Anthony Grant, I think we know him well enough now. I mean, great guy, great character when you talk to him.
Yeah.
And, he lost his mother and his father within the same year. I mean, he's been through a lot with his Florida State to JUCO to Nebraska. So you want to root for Anthony to get back and back on the field.
Right, and now I appreciate that sentiment. That's a kind sentiment. In a more hardcore sense, this isn't a great time for him to be gone.
No.
He's at a position that's strong. He has A.J. Allen, who who's highly regarded in the program, broke his collarbone last year against Oklahoma in the fourth game, but was coming. And I think a lot of people look at A.J. Allen as a guy who could supplant Anthony Grant. And then what happens? Rule says of what about Gabe Ervin? He said he's been one of the best players of the off season. Gabe Ervin, 6 foot, 222 pounds, and is one of the fastest players on the team. So Anthony Grant might be around because he's saying, I got to get back here. I got to get back.
Think how hungry he's going to be to get back.
Well, you
better
gotta
be.
have to be hungry, yeah.
He better be.
And let's face it, though, you need a bunch of backs.
You do. Look
Well,
at last
Ramir
year.
Johnson's there too.
Ramir's there, Emmett Johnson.
Emmett Johnson.
Yeah, they have some guys. That's a good room. Well, I keep saying it, and I'll keep saying it. It's the best. It's the best group on offense. That's the best group on offense.
You're listening here to the Husker Online Show as we talk spring football, opening headlines. What else jumped out to you guys on just the first access with Matt Rule? And, they are going to be morning practices again for the foreseeable future. I think the one noticeable thing I've seen just looking at past schedules versus new schedules, they are about an hour earlier on everything. They start an hour earlier. They get done an hour earlier. So they will be morning, but it will be a cleaner, quicker, start and finish time.
There's that, and then there are position switches.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
You don't always, a lot of teams. I don't know. I was watching Jimbo Fisher's press conference the other day, randomly. He's under a lot of pressure, but he was asked about position switches, and usually teams aren't. There's not a lot of that goes on, but Matt announced a couple pretty significant ones. Jake Applegate going from edge rusher to tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Moving sides of the ball is a major change. Applegate is a Lincoln Southeast redshirt freshman, 6'4", up to 237.
I liked him in high school as a tight end.
Good ball skills. Yeah. So that was an interesting one.
Brody Tagaloa.
Yeah, moving side again. A guy moving sides
Tight
of the
end to
ball.
D-line.
Yeah, which is probably a nod to the lack of depth up front, is my guess.
Now, how about this too? It didn't get asked to Rule, but they have stripped down all the single-digit jersey numbers on the roster. So numbers 0 through 9, there is not a player on the Huskers.com roster no longer wearing 0 through 9.
Why is that?
And it's a thing that he did at Temple and Baylor, that you have to earn the right to wear those single digits. So Quentin Newsom, veteran corner, number 6. He's now number 15.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's really interesting to me.
Rule has some old school about him, doesn't he?
Joe Paul, he's old school Joe. And they want to be outside a lot. So he said, this jumped out to me too. Our quarterbacks will always throw outside. We will not do things controlled inside.
That was fascinating.
Yeah.
That
It
little
makes
bit.
sense.
Yeah, it does. He just mentioned it in passing. No pun intended. But sorry, Abby.
That's why you're a world-class writer.
He just mentioned it in passing, but I found that fascinating. They will not, the quarterbacks will always throw outside when they're doing meaningful passing. It'll be outside.
That sounds
not
like
indoors.
Osborne almost.
Yeah, because he wants to throw the ball through the wind. He said, "That's fast. That stuff fascinates
And
me."
again, in this conference, like that, it's just one of those things that you're just like, well, why have they always been doing that?
Right.
Like, this just seems like something that is super practical. But going back to the number thing, so that goes back to even before he was at Temple. He apparently took that from Al Golden when he was working at Miami. And the idea is to give it 1 through 9, numbers 1 through 9, to the toughest players on the roster. So it's not just the best players. I think it's the guys that earn it with toughness, which obviously Matt Rule has been harping on since day one.
And look at the roster right here. You see it starts at number 10.
That's old school, isn't that? That strikes me as old school.
Now I have to do some thinking, like who are the players that got kind of hosed out of their number? Quentin Newsom was the one that
Are
immediately.
they still going to do zeros? Like,
That was Jacquez Yan and Tommy Hill.
Hill.
Those were the 2 zeros on the roster.
Well, that's interesting. I heard Deion Sanders talking about the similar thing. These kids, he said,
No D lineman.
Deion Sanders says kids come in and want number 1. He said, you don't get number 1. Why would you think you're going to get number 1 right out of high school? You haven't played at all. So it's a similar line of thinking. I love it.
Yeah,
I really do.
And he didn't even announce. It just kind of. That it's Rule will give you a lot, but you have to get it out of him. Like he wasn't just going to offer that to us. He didn't offer Chris Hickman necessarily and some of these guys out. That they were gone. He did give the suspension information, but he will tell you it if you ask him. But you've got to at least. I think that will be one of the questions. I believe we talked to Rule next week. We won't talk to him Thursday.
Right.
So that'll be an interesting thing from him just to say, hey, what's the deal with the single digits?
Oh, I'd like to hear about that, yeah.
The other thing you talked about were the quarterbacks. As expected, neither Casey Thompson or Logan Smothers are throwing at all. But he did mention, speaking of quarterbacks, that this was as good of a quarterback room as he's ever been a part of.
I know. Isn't that something?
Well, there's 6 scholarship quarterbacks on campus.
Just by volume, maybe, but like, I don't know.
I don't know.
He's had some good ones.
Rob, those guys are pretty good.
2 20-plus game Power 5 starters.
Right.
Logan Smothers and Chubba Purdy have started Power 5 games.
Yeah. Now, I'm talking, when I say those guys are pretty good, I mean the top 2. And I don't mind saying that about Sims because there's film.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen him play. He can play. He's pretty good. Rules said Rules mentioned the NFL in discussing Sims. And Casey, you saw Casey. I mean, Casey Thompson was a bright spot last year for Nebraska and a very tough
Arguably
year.
their best player.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's even much of an argument.
Well, Trey.
Yeah.
Trey Palmer.
Yeah, but what was Trey without Casey Thompson?
Right. Not much.
Good point, Robin.
Yeah. It's one of the. Yeah, I'd say it's one of those 2 on offense.
All right. Well, we have a full show on tap. Pro Day was this week, as you heard Tip say. We want to come back. We're going to talk more about Nebraska's Pro Day, what we learned from that next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washington. Always some good laughs off air here. But, gentlemen, Pro Day was on Wednesday. And that was interesting just to kind of see, just to be a fly on the wall, which we were. We were a very high up fly on the wall in the balcony, kind of watching from afar. But it was divided up into 2 separate pro days. You had the Nebraska Pro Day, then the small college Pro Day was after. They used to merge those all into one. So I wonder if that was a decision made by the pro scouts to go that way, or maybe Matt Rule
Could have been.
to say, hey, we're going to give you your own pro day after our pro day.
Yeah.
We don't want you to disrupt maybe the pace of our deal. But big day for Garrett Nelson, Caleb Tanner, Oliver Martin, by the way, 11.2 broad and a 41-inch vertical. So you had some guys make some marks, but let's start with Garrett Nelson. And you wrote about that on Wednesday, Sid.
Well, Garrett was happy with the way it turned out today. He didn't get invited to the NFL scouting combine, which was earlier this month in Indy, and that clearly bothered him. I mean, it was not a good day for him to find out that he hadn't been invited to that. So this was big. I mean, he you know what? There's no doubt there was pressure, but he handled it with a mindset of, I'm grateful to be able to do this. I'm going to go work out with my former teammates in front of 32 NFL scouts. And you watched him. I mean, we don't know the time. He ran in a 40, but it looked good. He looked powerful running the 40. He's really good in short area type drills, cone drills. He was in great shape. I think, I don't know if Garrett Nelson will get drafted, but if he doesn't, it probably won't be because he didn't do well today. I thought it looked good. I thought that picture looked good today, and I'd say otherwise, but I thought he looked powerful running the 40. That's what came to mind, powerful.
Mm-hmm. And, the guys I talked to, Trey Palmer, start off. Obviously, he caught a lot of attention during the combine, running the fastest 40 of any receiver.
What did he pump, a 4.33?
4.33.
4.33 in Indy.
Of any receiver. I think it was like 34th fastest overall. But so clearly didn't have to prove a lot. So he didn't run the 40. He didn't do the broad jump. But he wanted to showcase his versatility is what he said. He wanted to run routes and do the shuttle and show that he's not just a straight line track guy, that he can play football. And so it was funny. We asked him about the 40, and if he was happy with the 4.33. He says, "No, I was mad at it. I wanted to run a 4.2." So clearly, that was his focus during this process. And now the pro day is in the books. I think then he can start to focus on the actual draft, meet with teams. While he was in Lincoln for the pro day, he talked to the Giants and the Falcons before he met with us. And after he was walking away, a scout from the Jaguars wanted to talk to him too. So that communication is going to ramp up, I'm sure, for him. And, as we've seen, he's a guy that could potentially be a day 2 pick when all's said and done. And, with performances that he did in Indy, and I'm sure he followed that up with good numbers that pro day, I think he's an interesting prospect to watch. Who I've already seen reports that the Denver Broncos are very seriously looking at him. So there's several teams that are already starting to kind of sniff around to see what he's all about.
Yeah, his deal is, I mean, obviously it's speed, but he's got good hands. I mean, he had a few drops, but nothing major. He's a good receiver. What he'll have to prove to some people is he's physical enough. He's not particularly big. Can he negotiate NFL traffic, catch the ball in traffic? You know, on a kind of slant route when a big corner's across from you and puts hands on you. Will he be disrupted? He's not that physical. So that's what I want to see. But, man, I'll tell you what. Sean will talk about this. He is ultra confident, and that helps a lot.
Oh, I mean, from the minute I met Trey Palmer, I told you right away, God, this is about the most confident guy I've ever dealt with in my time around Nebraska. And, I mean, he was going back and forth with me just because he was that competitive. Like, he's like, I'm going to cut it up with you because I just want to – I mean, he's a dog. Like, he wants to always compete, be the best. He's hungry, and there's no way anybody could have predicted the year he had.
73 catches, I think he had.
A school record.
Yeah.
Second receiver to get 1,000.
1,043 yards. I think that was the number. 73, 1,043. I think those are the numbers. Yeah, that's big numbers now. Especially
when the offense didn't really have much else.
Right.
I mean,
that was without Casey Thompson for an extended period of time where that quarterback situation was a real problem, and yet he still had the best season a Nebraska wide receiver has ever had.
Now, I think I'll be curious, like, this year, can they get a receiver at Nebraska around 1,000? We don't. I mean, could a Billy Kemp or a Marcus Washington or somebody get to 1,000? But that record might stand for a long time.
They don't have speed like Trey.
Yeah, I know.
They don't have
the
that
yards
guy.
after contact. I don't know or yards after catch. That's what I meant.
You think about
yards after catch.
That's
Samori Torre, Trey Palmer. I mean, that's as fast of a combo of receivers as Nebraska's ever had.
Well, back to back, those guys were strong. Torre had 49 catches. He didn't have he wasn't as productive as.
But he was the best yards per catch guy.
Yeah, he was up in that 20 range per catch.
Didn't he have the most, like, 50-plus yard receptions in college football that year?
That's interesting, isn't it? Both those guys are transfers, 1-year guys. I mean, that's who's led.
And Billy Kemp might do it again this year.
Yeah, that's who's led Nebraska in receiving the last 2 years. Transfers, 1-year guys, and Kemp could be 3 straight years of that. I don't know if that's good or bad or otherwise, but it's sort of interesting. And Sean and Rob, I bet that's what happens. I think Kemp is he's the odds-on favorite to lead.
He's getting the most targets, I think.
Yeah.
And you brought this up, Sip and Robin. I'd be curious your take, but the biggest glaring thing about Pro Day, no true offensive linemen there, and no really. I mean, you had O'Shawn and Garrett Nelson as kind of edge guys, but no true D linemen. You know,
it's not good.
Devin Drew wasn't there.
Come on, it's not good. Just say it.
And then Brock Bando was not there. Hickson was not there. So, like, you know, their outgoing linemen didn't even consider the pros.
Yeah. And I'm not dogging on Hickson or Bando. I'm not doing that. That's not their fault.
But to win in this league, you better have a lot of linemen at your pro days.
Yeah.
You think?
Just more a reflection of having 0 draft prospects on either side of the interior line of scrimmage. And, I mean, a lot of that is on the offensive line. They have so many guys coming back. So, I mean, like, just sheer class breakdown-wise, they didn't have guys that were even ready to go. But, you know, when you have 0 on either side of the ball, outside of a couple edge guys, that's a problem.
No, it is. Matt Rule, I mean, if you're a Nebraska fan, you just have to pray that he upgrades that part. I mean, and he's talked about it. I'm confident he will because he addressed it right out of the gate. Now, on the other hand, it's not like they went out and got transfer enough. I don't think they got enough beef from the portal. They needed one more offensive lineman. They needed another defensive lineman. I mean, Elijah Judy was a big get, and that Ben Scott's, those are big gets. But you needed more. You needed one more on each side, I think.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk Nebraska basketball. The season in the books. what's next for Fred Hoiberg's squad once again, and this is really everywhere in college basketball. Lots of roster questions and other things moving forward. Robin Washet's going to unpack all of that next here. You're listening to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. Nebraska basketball in the books now, the season, and Robin wasn't on our spring football preview show last week. So really this is the first time, Sip, we get to unpack with Robin and start to look ahead. Roster attrition, Robin. Let's start there first. Update us on who, in terms of not the seniors, but what players at this point have already gone into the transfer portal.
Yeah, they have 2 transfer departures. Neither of them overly surprising. The first was Oleg Koyenets, redshirt freshman center. He played sparingly, especially when Blaise Keita was out with those ankle injuries. He kind of got forced in the rotation a little bit and showed some flashes. I mean, for being 7 foot with his coordination and I guess just offensive skill, he was a guy that you could maybe talk yourself into as a long-term project. But a lot of times guys don't want to sit around for 3 or 4 years and be a project. They want to go somewhere they can play and get on with their career. That's just the nature of the business. So that wasn't much of a surprise. And then Denham Dawson was shortly after, the redshirt freshman forward who started several games earlier in the year after C.J. Wilshire stepped out of the starting lineup and, again, showed flashes of potential. He had showcases athleticism with some highlight dunks and blocks and layups that you thought there was something to work with there, especially with the way that he played defense. He was one of their better defensive players, which vaulted him into the lineup after Juwan Gary got hurt. So, but again, it was one of those situations where he was just kind of a tweener. He wasn't big enough to play the 4, wasn't skilled enough offensively to be a guard, and so you just kind of had a trouble figuring out what his long-term path was in this lineup. And, again, when you're constantly trying to out-recruit guys in the portal, maybe it was a situation where you're like, hey, Denham, we might not be able to guarantee you the types of minutes. And it might be looking a little bit more like last season ended where you were hardly even in the rotation. So, none of those were big shocks, but I still think that there's probably some more movement that's eventually going to happen. I believe all the one-on-one meetings have happened. Now it's just a matter of guys kind of going back and talking with their family and their people about what's best for them. But right now they have 4 open scholarships with the 3 senior departures and then Dawson and Koyenets. They have 1 2023 signee in Eli Rice from IMG Academy. So currently 4. I would imagine when all said and done, they will have to fill 5 to 6 spots.
And what's the priority, Rob? Priorities.
It depends on who you ask. I put point guard and center at 1A, 1B, and you can flip those however you see fit because you lose Sam Griesel and you lose Derek Walker, 2 arguably of your most important players. So those are priority positions in the portal. And we'll see kind of which legitimate targets emerge. I would imagine when we get closer to around Final Four time, you'll start to see a little bit more clarity as far as potential targets go. Right now it's just the reaching out period where they're making calls, doing Zooms. So you see all these tweets about Nebraska is reaching out to so-and-so. Well, so is the entire country right now. So that you just take it for surface level as Nebraska doing its due diligence, laying the groundwork on potential portal options. But once you start getting visits set up, then you know it's for real. Because with transfer recruiting, it's so much different, as we know, than high school recruiting, to where guys aren't just going to go through and take all 5 officials and enjoy the process. They're done with that. They don't have time to do that because spots fill up fast. So if they take the time and effort to come to Lincoln on an official visit, that shows you there's significant mutual interest. And Nebraska's success rate on closing on transfers once they get to campus is very high. So once the visits start getting set up, that's when you can kind of start to jump ahead and start picturing lineups. So we should know that within the next couple of weeks.
Robin, I'm curious, have any of the coaching movement around the country gotten your attention? Rick Pitino going to St. John's, Ed Cooley leaving Providence to go to Georgetown. Notre Dame still has not named a coach, and there's a lot of guys that we're interested in that have been mentioned for Notre Dame. Bobby Hurley's re-signed.
Yeah, Hurley staying at Arizona State was big.
Re-upped at Arizona State. Not necessarily.
Micah Shrewsbury at Penn State has been talked about a lot. Notre Dame, his name has been linked there. It was linked to Providence, Georgetown. So he's a hot commodity.
You know who else is linked to that job?
Who?
McDermott.
Oh,
Yeah, I'd watch that. I mean, if you're a Creighton fan, that would concern you.
And they're going to probably beat Princeton.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, that's the largest point spread of any game.
I think it's 11 the last time.
In the Sweet 16 games, it's the biggest spread.
yeah. You said a couple teams should have beaten Princeton though, but we'll see. I expect them to win, so I don't think anything happens on that until obviously the season's over. But certainly, something. I mean, there's a lot of rumors out there. I know that irritates people to talk about that around here, but so the coaching cycle, I'm as far as like the Big Ten's concerned, the Shrewsbury one is interesting.
Really one to watch
because he's done a fantastic job at Penn State, and like a lot of times especially at the Big Ten tournament when I was watching them, I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, these guys are what Fred Hoiberg wanted Nebraska to be, to where they play this 5-out NBA style offense. They're loaded with shooters.
Yeah, they are.
They're a guard dominant team that just has a lot of tough dudes.
They are tough.
And they
East Coast guys.
They play together well as a team. And so like
they do.
That picture of what they were at the end of this season, like that, I think ideally when Fred took this job, that's what he wanted Nebraska to be. And it has taken him much longer to get it to that point.
I think what you'd say about Shrewsbury is he squeezed all he could out of that team. He did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and they're losing a lot.
Yeah, getting to the second round and pushing Texas, and they pushed Texas. I didn't think they were good enough to beat Texas. I knew they were good enough to push them. But yeah, they were interesting. And Shrewsbury clearly knows what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. Now he's an Indiana guy too, so Notre Dame makes sense.
It'd be unfortunate for the Big Ten to lose him. I think. I'd like to see Penn State. If you're a Penn State fan, you'd like to see that program grow under him. Instead of in his second year, he's already gone.
You just wonder what the appeal of that job though is compared to a job like Notre Dame in terms of NIL support. I mean, you're at a football school. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. And speaking of the Big Ten, Robin, I'm curious your take on this. I mean, obviously the Big Ten tied the SEC with 8 bids. Only Michigan State, a 7 seed, makes the second weekend. Indiana and Purdue were both projected to be second weekend teams, didn't make it. No other upsets besides Michigan State. What is your big picture take on just where the Big Ten is at? We know they're good at getting bids, but they're just not good at winning in this tournament.
Yeah, and it's been a problem for this league for a long time. I mean, 20 years since its last national champion.
Michigan State.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it's been an ongoing issue where they can be the regular season darlings all year long and talk about how great it's a 10-bid league, 11-bid league, all that sort of stuff. But when it comes down to what matters the most and winning in the tournament,
second weekend
they don't only lose, but they lose in embarrassing fashion. I mean, that Purdue loss was embarrassing. I mean, like that can't happen to what is supposed to be your strongest program in the league. And so it's just a continuation where. If it weren't for Tom Izzo being the best coach in March, the Big Ten would be in an even worse spot right now. So I think the over-under, what was it, like 8.5 wins for the Big Ten over the course of the tournament? I think if Michigan State goes to the national championship, then they might
break the over.
They might break the over. If I do the math on that right. So it's an issue. You can talk about the style of play, the dependence on bigs as opposed to guards,
in the regular season,
the way games are officiated. I mean, there's all sorts of theories, but I mean, it's gone on for such a long time that if there was an easily identifiable issue, it would have been addressed right now. And it's not like teams. It's like this plodding league. I mean. Michigan State, they get out and run. Penn State gets out and run. I mean, you got teams that play with tempo. Iowa, and so I think there's a misconception that it's like this big heavyweight boxing fight. I think it's just an issue of the totality of the regular season, and
maybe. I mean, the Big East and Big 12
and
have
the way it's officiated. Yeah,
I would say the Big East and Big 12 are very tough. They're tough leagues.
It's a physical league.
Right. I don't know what it is, Rob. I don't think it's easily explained.
Seeding matters, too, though. And the Big Ten only had – I mean, Indiana was a 4 and Purdue was a 1.
What was Northwestern? Oh, they were they were
a 6 or something.
Yeah.
Or 7. I mean
it's seeding's pot.
So, you only had 2 teams carry a top 4 seed, which by the metrics, those are Sweet 16 teams. You've got to get – the Big East had Providence – or Xavier and Marquette, and Marquette got beat. but they had, your second place team in the Big Ten should be better than a 4 seed.
Okay.
Like your second place team needs to be a 2 or a 3.
Okay.
And then you start getting some 2s and 3s.
Right.
That's how you get. But when you're buried in these 6 through 11 seeds,
But Sean, I don't know. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but the seeds to me, what's happened nationally, I've been interested in what Rob says about this. When I watch this tournament, I'm sort of taken aback by how even the distribution of talent.
Parity has never been greater in college
So,
basketball.
Sean, that's why I kind of push back on the seed thing. Okay, I'll give you an example. Kansas State, 3 seed, Kentucky, 6. I thought Kentucky was more talented than Kansas State. Okay, Kansas State, 3 seed, Kentucky,
people
6.
acted like that was an upset.
Kentucky, 6. I thought Kentucky was more talented. They had, let's put it this way. They had the National Player of the Year, in Oscar Shwebue and Kason Wallace. I thought those were the 2 best players on the court. You could do that. You could play that game in a lot of instances.
Duke,
Sean.
Tennessee.
Yeah, those. I don't think the seed matters. I don't know. It's not easily explained what's going on with the Big Ten. Rob, you mentioned guards. Well, Penn State had a great guard. I mean, a great guard in, say his name.
Jalen Pickett.
Yeah, Jalen Pickett. Maryland has a great guard. A great guard. They had a great inside-outside game. I don't know. Now, Purdue, on the other hand, Jaden Smith, 7 turnovers in that first-round loss. They didn't have a good guard. Yeah. They had a great big.
Before we run out of time here, Nebraska's hosting a 4-star guard on an official visit Monday and Tuesday. Stories on Husker Online. I don't think either of you guys have retweeted it yet. So
we're in the show right now.
Well, what's his name?
Nick Janowski. He's from Wisconsin, and Wisconsin people love this guy. He's a 3-time state champ, averaged over 20 a game, shot 41.6% from 3-point range, 55% from the field. He's a dude. He's a winner. And you talk to guys like Andy Kendi, who's a Wisconsin native. He's from Andy's hometown. Matt Reynolds, our former intern's a reporter up in Green Bay. They absolutely love him. So a very notable official visit, 2024 recruit. So obviously for next season, but we're in the middle of the portal recruiting, but Nebraska's staff is already putting the effort towards continuing to build for the future. So one to watch there.
All right, when we come back, we'll take questions in the mailbag. Abby Barmore will join us. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. Let's bring in now the world-famous Abby Barmore, who is knee-deep herself in WNIT coverage as Amy Williams' team staying alive still, but lots to get to in the mailbag. Abby, where are you going to start us off at this week?
All right, first one. After hearing praise about Gabe Ervin and Ramir Johnson, along with Anthony Grant's suspension, how do you see the running back room shaking out?
I mean, it's very early still. That's the hard thing, but I think Anthony Grant's going to have to re-earn everything. And I think Gabe Ervin has kind of put himself back into the 2021 version of Gabe Ervin. And A.J. Allen, we know what this kid has. I mean, it is very hard to call this room right now.
Yeah, Ramir. Don't forget Ramir. I mean,
Ramir. By the way, I get hammered for Keisei Tominaga.
Yeah.
You get hammered for Ramir.
Ramir was the leading rusher in 2000. Ramir Johnson was the leading rusher.
Ramir.
2021, right? He was, and he's back as a full-time running back. Don't forget about him. But it is a hard call. Now, most positions when a new coaching staff become pretty much wide open.
Yeah.
And this one will. It's hard to handicap, but they've practiced once. A.J. Allen is really intriguing. He's really intriguing based on what we saw, his ascension through 4 games last year.
He could run away with it.
He's smooth. I mean, that's a smooth running back. He knows how to play the position. But you cannot rule out Anthony Grant. He ran for 915 yards last year.
Yeah, and as we talked about, it's just a lot of it for now depends on how much time he misses. I mean, how long is the suspension going to be? If he's back next practice, then I'm sure he's right back in the thick of it. So
he's in the thick of it no matter what. Right?
But I mean, how much catching up is he going to have to do if he does miss extended time?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, next one. Who is in the starting rotation for the defensive line, and do the Huskers have enough depth to compete at that position for a grueling fall season?
Oh, that's a great question.
Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, and
Stephon Wynn. Stephon Wynn. You wonder about Raquan Buckley. Who else, Sean, who's in that group? Rob
Gunnarsson. Are we considering him an edge?
Yeah, so I kind of tuned up the scholarship chart a little bit, because they've eliminated the
There it
nick
is.
and the edge, and they just have DL, LB, safety, and corner.
Oh, we didn't mention Elijah Judy. So there you go. It's Stephon Wynn. Who's the starters? My guess.
Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher. Let's say they're
Okay.
and then
so it'll be
Stephon
Judy or
and
Wynn.
Judy. Those four guys.
Yeah.
Then Gunnarsson.
Well, I mean, Gunnarsson.
Kai Whalen is a wild card.
Yeah. Now wait a second though. Now what gets interesting, what gets confusing, I'm sure to people, is Stephon Wynn's a 300-pounder. Hutmacher's a 300-pounder. Robinson's 300-pounder. Judy's a 290-pounder. K. Walling weighs 235. Gunnarsson's probably 250. So I don't know. It just depends what's it going to look like in a 3-3-5. I don't know how they're going to use those positions. But as far as bigs, we'll just call them bigs like Rob does in basketball. They don't have enough bigs.
The 280 plusers.
No,
They don't.
They
They
don't
don't
have enough.
They don't. They frankly don't. And it's frankly a major concern in my opinion.
Seems like a portal priority
gotta
post spring
be.
But
if they can
guess
get
what?
one.
That's everyone's.
Yeah, I know.
priority.
I know.
It is.
What do you need in the portal? A pass rusher, a D-line body, and a tackle.
Yeah. Almost any year you need a big defensive lineman.
Yep.
You can find receivers, running backs.
It's super saver. I mean, you don't find how many guys are 6'4", 290 are at your grocery store every day. You don't see them.
It's just like bigs in basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, every team in the country wants them. You can find guards anywhere.
Yeah. No, they're light there. They're light.
All right, Abby, what's next?
Try to take us through how you think this big recruiting weekend is going to go, this upcoming weekend, and how will that go down with so many high-profile visitors in town?
It's huge. I mean, you have 25-plus guys with offers. I believe 16 or 4 or 5 stars. 7 players are the number one ranked players in their respective states coming in this weekend.
How about that? Now, here's the deal. I listened to Jerome Tang the other day, basketball coach at Kansas State, say, "Oh, everybody talks about coaching. It's about dudes." I heard Bill Bush the other day saying, everybody talks about scheme magicians. You got to get a guy that has a good scheme. No, it's about dudes. Scheme, I heard Jimbo Fisher yesterday at his press conference saying, it's not about scheme. It's about players and execution. You got to get guys like Rule knows it. He knows what you got to do to win a championship. You got to go get big-time players, which that's what they're bringing in this weekend.
Yeah,
big time
it's a
players.
mixed bag. I mean, Williams Noarney, the number one player in Missouri, a 5-star D lineman. But Brandon Baker, that's probably, I think, nationally the one that's the most surprising to a lot of folks.
Position.
Number one offensive tackle in the country.
there you go.
Modern day California.
There you go.
I mean, everybody nationally thought that this guy was going to visit Ohio State or even Texas this weekend. He's coming to Nebraska.
That's big.
Nathaniel Frazier will be here as well. The number one running back, his teammate. But you look at Brandon Baker.
Look at him.
This is a, as big time of a lineman that's visited Lincoln in a long time.
Yeah, that's the kind of guys you see at Ohio State and Michigan, right?
And
What was
that's-
Michigan's strongest position group?
Well, they had the Outland Trophy winner, who, by the way, came from the transfer portal.
Right, and their offensive line. And look, I mean, and who's a lot of people picking to win a national title this year?
Michigan.
Because they're bringing everybody back.
Yeah.
And Ohio
good
State's
up
losing
front.
everybody.
Yeah, they're
Yeah,
good.
I'm excited. I'm intrigued. You'll have a lot of guys here this weekend, and some key in-state guys too, like Carter Nelson's back again. Caleb Benning's here, so you'll have
Big.
a mixed bag of everything. Abby, what's next?
I know you just listed a lot of guys that are coming in this next weekend, but who do you think is the most important non-quarterback visitor that's coming to Nebraska?
I just said it, Sean.
I mean, I kind of went through a lot of the weekend itself, but I want to go through the actual list here. I know we're going to talk more about it in our next segment, so I don't want to give too much away in this mailbag, but I mean, you can make a case for all of them. The St. Louis, Ryan Wingo being from St. Louis, it's been a long time since the top St. Louis guys come to Nebraska. I do think they've made a really big effort. You heard Matt Rule say Kansas City, Missouri, they flew the plane down to speak at the coaches clinic. I mean, I think they're really trying to make a push. And Trev Alberts has given them the support they need because Matt Rule can't drive back and forth. When you're managing the team in Lincoln and doing everything, that's too much time for him.
Too much time, yeah.
But they can fly down and fly back, and he was able to really make an impact. And I think they're going to get a lot of these guys here on campus, from Missouri, from Kansas, and that's going to be big.
You like to see that big body receiver. I mean, That's another thing in the Big Ten. It helps. It helps.
Jacob and Jared Smith, too, the twins from Cheshire Academy in Connecticut, Cheshire, Connecticut. Both defensive lineman guys that will be here as well. All right, Abby, I think we have time for one more.
All right, our last question. So Wednesday was Nebraska's pro day. Do you have a favorite pro day memory or something that really sticks out to you?
Watching Randy Gregory work out 2014. I'd never seen a Nebraska player, and I'd covered my share of pro days. I'd never seen a Nebraska player look that good. He had gotten himself right. Now then he fell off shortly after that. He got in some trouble, but he had got himself right for pro day, and I just remember feeling really bad for the people that had to follow him in drills. Because I did. I mean, because you had some good
No matter
players.
what, your performance is going to be totally unimpressive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you remember Randy, what was he, Sean? Was he 6'5", 6'6"? Using a 240, 245 range, and he was going to be a top 5 pick. I mean,
He's still playing for a reason.
Right. Now, what we're talking about is a guy who was going to be a top 5 overall, and that's what it should look like, and that's what it did look like. He was a
6'5", 235.
Yeah, there you go.
34-inch arms, 10-inch hands.
Yeah, I'll never. Now,
4'6", 440.
I get into it.
36 and a half vert.
Me and Damon have got into it. I've got into it with other guys. Who's the best pass rusher at Nebraska you've ever seen? You know, they naturally those older guys are coming with Wistrom. Yeah. Now Wistrom didn't look like that. I mean, now Wistrom was great, but if I'm lining him up on pro day, I'm taking Gregory.
The fact that Randy Gregory is still in the NFL despite all of his
all the baggage,
that says everything you need to know. Yeah. Where NFL teams are willing to put up and wait through all that stuff until he gets his stuff figured out. That is a
Look at that
sheer
picture.
reflection of talent.
Yeah, you're right. Look at that photo. I mean, he didn't always look like that at Nebraska. He got himself in premium shape for that day.
Remember that Miami game in Lincoln?
That's pro day.
They had a first-round draft pick tackle at Miami, and he just ate that guy's lunch.
Yeah,
in that game.
Right. That's right.
But my pro day memory, obviously in Ndamukong Suh's pro day, which would have been in 2010.
That was an event.
That was a big deal. But go back to 2011. That was really the last time. That was the last team Nebraska had that has been in the top 5. They were in the top 5. In fact, since the 0-1 Colorado game / Miami games to end that year, there's only been a couple of weeks where Nebraska's been ranked in the top 5. I think 1 week total, and it was that team.
2011?
The 2010 team.
2010 team, okay.
But the 11 pro day had 7 draft picks.
Who were they?
Prince Mukamara, Roy Halou, Alex Henry, DeJon Gomes, Niles Paul, Keith Williams, who now works at Nebraska, and Eric Haig. Think about that.
Ballers.
7 draft picks.
Yeah, not a lot of big dudes in there.
And people are like, man, those Bo team. I mean, they had some good teams back then.
Oh, they did.
Now a lot of those were Callahan guys.
Yep.
Bo did develop Haig.
Mm-hmm. He developed Sue.
He brought in Gomes. He was a big believer in Roy Halou from the get-go. Mm-hmm. Prince Mukamara, who knows how he would have developed under the other staff. Marvin Sanders did a great job with him, but 7 draft picks in that 2011 pro day.
7.
What was the year? So here's a different one, and you guys might be able to help me out. I can't remember who the player was, but it was like, I want to say like late 2000s, early 2010s, where he had his kid with him, and he brought his kid and sat him up next to him, and they're asking like, so how'd you do in pro day? He's like, I don't know, ask him. How'd Dad do in his pro day? And the kid goes, Dad didn't do very well.
Now I'm confused. Now I'm trying to.
Kevin Suits and I were talking about that today.
I don't remember, Sean. How do you?
And we were trying to think of who, I want to say it was around like the Brandon Kinney era. I don't think it was Brandon Kinney.
Ooh, could have been Brandon Kinney though.
Was the guy drafted?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, clearly he didn't do very well in his pro day, but like that stuck.
That's
out.
yeah. That's
I forgot about that until old Suitsy reminded me. Of that
yeah. I don't remember that. I might not have been
back in the '90s. Like, did you go to all those pro days, or was it kind of
seems like it? Yeah, seems
the
like
pre-internet era.
Yeah, it was pre-internet era, so it was a little different.
A little less pressure.
But come on, the talent. We don't have to get into that. It was ridiculous. I mean, I think the 95 team had 19 guys on defense that played in the NFL. I mean, just on defense. Not all draft picks, but if you look at the depth, if you look at the tackle chart, I think you could come up with 18 guys.
Wow. All right, we're going to come back. We're going to close the show. We're going to talk more about this recruiting weekend and what it means to Matt Rule next. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. Final segment here of the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Robin Washett. Guys, we hit on the recruiting weekend a little bit in our last segment, but let's close on that topic with Nebraska. Right now, according to our On3 list, we have 26 unofficial visitors coming in for the weekend. I believe 16 or 4 or 5 stars right now. It's really incredible. I mean, I think this recruiting weekend is going to get the attention of just about everyone nationally. It's going to be the story. Now, Brian Munson did a really good job in 3 and Out this week.
Okay.
You know, to kind of just preference. I think people are like, oh, they're not going to be a lot of commits. A lot of these guys, this is maybe visit number 1, visit number 2. It's before official business season starts. A lot of these guys, I think the key is, can you get them to come back? Mm-hmm. That is what you need to watch for. Okay. If this goes well, can Matt Rule get some of these key guys that are here for the very first time in their life to come back?
Okay. So you're not just so you're on the record here saying you don't expect like a long line of commits or any commits?
Well, it's just not the norm for high profile.
Right.
Like if you have the leverage on a kid, you could kind of force their hand. But in a weekend like this, I don't really.
I got it.
You're not in a position to tell Dylan Raiola he's got to commit.
No.
Or Williams Noarni. Or, I mean, you want them to get comfortable with you, to build relationships. Mm. And that's the key.
Yeah, that's huge.
Brian put it at his percentage of getting a commitment this weekend, 20%.
20. Okay.
So
just a single commitment.
The percentage I put on this weekend leading to a commitment is only about 20%.
But I don't want to diminish the weekend.
A lot of it's just the caliber of players.
Right.
I mean, these guys are going to go through the process. You're getting
Right.
offers from everybody.
And Rule has said it. Rule has said it, and so have other coaches. Nebraska is a place where it's important to get people here because I think there's a misconception among many, many people, not just kids, about what Lincoln, Nebraska looks like, what Omaha, Nebraska looks
Big
like.
farm, according. I mean, a lot of kids think it's just like the sticks, and then they come out here and they're always like, "Whoa."
Well, this is not the sticks, right? I mean, Lincoln is in the middle of a cornfield essentially, but it's not.
It's 300,000 people,
right? 300,000, and it's nice. I mean, Rule has talked about he was so struck by the Haymarket Rail Yard District when he came here, and it's striking. You got to kind of imagine yourself coming in to Lincoln. And as you drive in, what do you see? Memorial Stadium off to your left. In the distance, you see this incredible Pinnacle Bank Arena. And right away, I think if you're coming in and you've never seen it, you're like, wow. I mean, what are we going into here? You're going into a nice downtown area.
Mm-hmm. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. Dylan Raiola, too. I just think that angle never gets old. I mean, we'll keep riding that one, baby, all the way. But what's next? We know he's got other visits lined up. In fact, I'm going to pull that up on his On3 page right now because he's got several more coming in the works. Like right now, Chad Simmons, who has a great relationship with the Raiolas, he has Dylan Raiola coming back again for the Red-White Spring Game weekend. So that would be interesting if that is indeed true, that he'll be here on the 22nd of April as well. Georgia, he's there. He was there this past weekend. I didn't hear a lot out of that. Nothing really came out of that. He has been to USC now twice, January and then March 4th weekend. Then you go down to Oregon, April 29th. He's been out at Oregon as well. So
he will be out at Oregon.
And then Georgia Tech, he was there last week too on St. Patty's Day.
Georgia Tech.
And the connection there is, I believe the coach that was at Georgia is now the head coach of Georgia Tech. Okay. So there's a relationship there with that coach.
Boy, that'd be an upset special. Dylan Raiola ends up at Georgia Tech. Tell me that wouldn't be a massive upset.
I will not tell you that because I will.
Yeah.
But this weekend, just get him back. And then around these other guys, like that's what's unpredictable about this weekend because you never know what kind of bonds are going to get created.
Right.
What if a bunch of these guys, and this is, I'm just being pie in the sky, glass very half full guy here, but what if a bunch of these guys are like, let's do this.
Let's try this.
Let's come here.
Yeah.
Like we can do this.
Yeah.
Like what if that happens? I mean, that's what you're ultimately like, that these guys that are here all weekend hit it off and say, let's go, come here.
Yeah, you're giving yourself a chance of that happening by getting them here, obviously. That's the big thing. And if you're a Nebraska fan, I try to look at it through the eyes of Nebraska fans. You just like the aggression. and you understand. Now you know what we have. Silver lining to the struggles of recent years, you kind of got an idea of what you need. You got a better idea of what you need. Nebraska, I mean, you don't win the Big Ten, I always say, with cute stories and, guys that are overachievers. That helps to have guys like that on your roster. But Ohio State doesn't win Big Ten titles with overachieving players. What do you see when you see them? What do you see when you see Michigan now? I mean,
first-round draft picks.
First rounders. No
Multiple.
doubters. No doubters. Yeah, no doubters. So, yeah, I mean, Stroud's going to be the first – C.J. Stroud. Probably be the first pick overall. How do you beat that team if you don't have all Big Ten players? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And Rule's got to move Nebraska back into that realm, and it's not going to happen overnight.
No, and that's I think everyone wants it to flip overnight. I think it's a step
usually doesn't.
It's a step-by-step build, though. I mean, like
usually is.
Can he? I mean, and we're going to talk about this till we're blue in the face. But can they take that step? He needs a progressional step forward this first year to get to a bowl leader. I mean, I just think. And people scoff at that.
Sean, well, they don't scoff. Some people say, don't put so much pressure on the coach.
I mean, they won 4 last year, and they had the lead in the fourth quarter in 4 of their losses.
I'm not saying they have to get to a bowl, but Rule himself talks glowingly about what he's inherited. All the people that try to say, and there's people in the media market that try to say, oh, he walked into a dumpster fire. I mean, this place was a train wreck. They can't. How do they keep saying that?
Yeah, tell that to Iowa.
Yeah. And how do they keep saying that?
Beat Wisconsin
how do you
year.
keep saying that when you listen to Rule? When you hear Rule say these guys are tough. This is a competitive team. This team had a 3.12 GPA. That's unheard of.
Unheard of is what he said.
Yeah.
During a coaching change.
But yet you'll still have people say, "Oh no, he walked into a bad situation." No, it's not that bad. I mean, they got a returning quarterback who's really good, 8 guys back on defense that was playing pretty well at the end of the season. Not a train wreck. Now, am I saying they got to go to a bowl game? No, they don't. But it looks like the type of roster that can win 6 or 7.
It's not out of the question at all for them to go to a bowl. I mean, I don't consider it putting it unnecessarily high expectations to say get to 6 wins.
Right.
And in today's landscape, you're not that far off.
They weren't.
For one.
Right.
Their schedule is not overwhelming.
No.
I mean, you got some tough ones out of the gate.
Tough ones out of the gate. That's the thing.
So if you can keep your head above water there, who knows? But we'll see. So, Sean, I want to ask you. Brian wrote this in his 3-2-1 or his 3 and out. So he's been doing this for 24 years. That's about as long as you've been doing it, right?
Yeah.
Roughly. Yeah. Of covering Nebraska football recruiting, and he said nothing compares to a visit weekend like this coming weekend in his entire career.
Jeez.
Would you go as far as to say that?
In terms of volume of visitors and 5 stars and number 1s and 4 stars, yeah. I've never seen one you can't really have one bigger than this. And this is the biggest.
I don't know how you do it any bigger than this.
I mean, what do you bring in, 50? I mean, 26 guys, 26.
Incredible.
Guys that are coming on their
4
own.
or 5 stars.
I mean, that's a recruiting operation. That's just not Rule.
It's a recruiting seminar. I mean, it's going to be a convention over there on Friday.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, it's going to be insane. I mean, I can't imagine just the amount of work in that building that's going to go on to put together a day on Friday to entertain these recruits, their families, and then they'll come back again on Saturday for practice, assuming they're staying overnight, which I believe most are, Friday. And they've even invited the recruits Thursday morning. They can go to the workouts if they want. I'm sorry, Friday morning. If they wanted to go over to the 6 a.m. Workouts, they're welcome to come over that early to see the team do their meetings and workouts.
Interesting.
This was asked in the chat, beyond just the normal visit experience, is there anything that Nebraska can do to really put this thing over the top? People are asking meeting Tom Osborne or stuff like that.
Matter.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of
wow, Sean.
I mean,
ways that Nebraska can really put this weekend over the top, given the significance we just talked about. What more can they do besides tour the facilities, meet with the academic team?
I mean, create a culture, create a bond, create an atmosphere for these kids to want to be with each other. I mean, that's what they've got to do. And I know they're going to do some games. They're going to eat, their meals, and they're going to have yard games and fun things set up where guys can interact and play and have fun.
Yeah, you don't want to. Hey, and now what I would say, Rob and Sean, is you don't want to present your program as something that's not. So just show them what it is. I mean,
Family, culture.
right? Yeah.
So it should be big, and we're going to have coverage. We'll have a lot of coverage. So get on Husker Online Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Got the best guy in the business, Brian Munson, in terms of tracking down recruits. I've never been around anyone better than Brian at doing that. So
Just goes into beast mode.
you just
and
stay
things
out of
like
Brian's
this.
way because he will get a hold of by far the most visitors of anybody because he's done it for 20-plus years that way.
24.
And so stay on Husker Online. We'll have full coverage. Got a great spring special, too. 4 months for $10, limited time special to get Husker Online access. So take advantage of that. Make sure you follow, subscribe to us here on YouTube or anywhere that you can find podcasts. Thanks again for joining us here as we wrap it up with another edition of the Husker Online Show.